Welcome to the Hub Roundtable for the 11th of July, 2025. I'm Rudyard Griffiths, publisher, joined by my wingman, editor-at-large and co-founder, Sean Speer. Sean, how do we find you on this sweaty Friday going into a hot July summer weekend?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Rudyard. How about you?
I'm doing well, but for our listening audience who are not over on our YouTube channel, come on, you head over there. Lots of fantastic videos and content. You are missing out on Sean's new haircut. Sean's spending the summer in New York, in Harlem, and he's got a lid today that is, what do you call that? Tighten something, Sean. Your barber took out the shears.
Yeah, you like that, don't you? But this was a self haircut, Rudyard. We're in an affordability crisis. I can't afford to go to a barber. I did it myself. It looks okay on the front, as long as you don't check out the back. I think it still needs a bit of work.
Okay, I want your wonderful wife, Caitlin, to carve like a big H into, above your right ear. I think that would look great on the YouTube channel. We get some more views.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it takes for the Hub.
Oh, yeah. Talking about whatever it takes, Sean, we got to spend the first half of the show bringing our audience up to speed on the news last night of a letter from the White House from President Donald J. Trump to Mark Carney indicating 35% tariff threat to the country August 1st. We're going to unpack that. It may not be as scary as it first sounded. We'll break it all down for you and try to maybe give a sense of what this means to where negotiations are at or where they may be headed over the coming weeks as we close in on that all-important August 1st date. And then on the back half of the show, for the Hub donors, for all of our Hub heroes and Hub fellows, I don't know, Sean, I got that tingly feeling in my spine. I worry that the tax man cometh. We are going to break down some genuinely scary numbers on the Canadian budget, debts and deficits, and increasing kind of chatter out there that more taxation should be the solution to Canada's growing fiscal woes. But Sean, let me have you kick off by bringing our audience up to date on what happened last night and this letter and your reaction to what Donald Trump seems to be doing in the closing weeks of this negotiation with Canada.
Yeah, it's a pretty big development, isn't it? We've been led to believe that a deal was imminent. We've heard that at various points over the past couple of weeks, and yet late yesterday we were hit with this open letter from President Trump to Prime Minister Carney, where he sets out, amongst other things, his intention to enact a new round of tariffs of 35% on Canadian goods sent into the United States, subject to the USMCA. We have some of the old arguments we've heard in the past, Rudyard, about fentanyl exports, supply management, the trade deficit. It really is a greatest hits. There's much to say, but one of the lines that stayed with me the most, rather, and I suspect same with you, is he says, quote, "As you are aware, there'll be no tariff if Canada or companies within your country decide to build or manufacture product within the U.S. And in fact, we will do everything possible to get approvals quickly, professionally, and routinely. In other words, in a matter of weeks." Setting aside all of the various arguments that the letter makes about why the tariffs are justified, I keep coming back to this idea that behind a lot of this is a motivation to try to essentially make the U.S. market more attractive for manufacturers in particular. And if this doesn't represent another round of trying to pull capital from Canada into the United States.
Yeah. And look, we take no satisfaction in this, but, the Hub was early and frankly out of sync with much of mainstream media last fall when we went out. You and I wrote a series of op-eds saying, we have to understand his tariffs as both a fiscal policy, a response to the growing worsening of America's debt and deficit position, and as a reindustrialization strategy, as a form of economic warfare. And unfortunately, Sean, at the time, everyone understandably was kind of full of hopium about a new Team Canada approach and lobbying governors and getting corporate CEOs together on either side of the border. And people understandably hoped for the best. But Sean, I think unfortunately we were right back in November, and we're kind of seeing, I think, where this negotiation is headed. And I'm with you there. I don't see a negotiation that lands on zero tariffs for Canada. I think the revenue part of this is too important for the Trump administration. And as you say, they are serious about this idea of a tariff wall, right or wrong. It may not work, but they are going to try to return manufacturing to these blue states that were so important in their win in November. And Canada is a rich and fertile source of small and medium-sized companies that can be encouraged to relocate on the basis of avoiding a tariff wall. I want your thoughts, Sean, on another part of the letter, which was this shout out about our supply management system and this seeming inability of the president to give up the idea that Wisconsin dairy farmers, again, talk about swing states, right? Very focused on Wisconsin dairy farmers and what he feels, the president, are unjustified tariffs on imports of dairy into Canada. Does that suggest to you that maybe supply management is emerging as one of the big stumbling blocks in the current negotiation?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. We have a federal law passed in Parliament, Rudyard, committing the government to protecting supply management. I'm just not sure that that's possible or even desirable. The idea that Canada would forego a possible deal with the United States to get tariffs, if not eliminated, then certainly down, because we've decided to protect supply management at the expense of the rest of the economy, strikes me as a pretty difficult case for the Carney government to make to the country. What I think is notable, though, with respect to supply management and the digital services tax a couple of weeks ago, is that you get the sense on these major issues, the president is inclined to negotiate them outside of negotiations, which is to say he doesn't see them, Rudyard, as gives that Canada offers on the table in exchange for something else. In his mind, those are table stakes. That just gets us back to the negotiating table. Right. And so one thing we've talked a lot about at the Hub is the potential trade-offs here that Canada is going to have to make in these negotiations. We've often said that the DST and the supply management were pretty easy marks. It makes you wonder if that's what he's talking about publicly, what is he actually asking us to do privately? And what could that mean for Canadian sovereignty, Canada's economy, Canada's relationship to countries around the world? That, I think, is the $64 billion question. What don't we know is presently on the table in these negotiations? And can Prime Minister Carney navigate the domestic politics of some of those potential compromises with the Trump administration?
Yeah, having run a campaign on elbows up, it I think is an increasingly difficult political, sales job for Carney to, let's say, capitulate on supply management. I don't think that's insignificant. I think there are other probably even bigger landmines out there, like some of Quebec's language laws and other perceived industries in Canada that are subject to, in the views of Americans, special treatment. Our banking sector, our telecommunications sector, foreign ownership restrictions. None of this is being discussed in public now, but I bet it is part of what's going on around that negotiation table. And I think today's eruption, or last night's eruption by the president, suggests that this negotiation right at this moment is bogged down, at least from the American point of view. So hence this letter. But I think it's important, Sean, for you to explain to the audience why, in a sense, the 35% number, while it sounds scary, in fact is in some ways, it's not a nothing burger, but it's not a 35% tariff on all Canadian goods. Unpack that for us, because it might suggest that the president is also leaving the door open here, that he hasn't really brought out the brass knuckles yet. This is more of a tap, than a sucker punch.
Yeah, well, for those who've been following along since this story began, one of the most complicating aspects has been the extent to which we've seen these rollout of tariffs, oftentimes stacked on top of each other. The presidential language has been vague, and then people have scrambled to understand, which goods are affected, when the tariffs are taking effect, which ones are suspended. You almost need a diagram at this point, Roger, to kind of understand exactly what U.S. tariff policy is towards Canada. But to your point, one of the unspoken aspects of the letter that we've learned in the subsequent hours is that the tariffs will only apply, as many of the tariffs presently do, to what are called non-compliant USMCA goods, which is to say goods that are coming from Canada into the United States and for various reasons are not subject to the USMCA. And that's often because, Roger, they have inputs from other countries such that they don't meet what are called the rule of origin provisions, which means that not enough of the good was made in Canada to be able to enter the U.S. under the USMCA tariff-free. That's a long and complicated way of saying most products that come from Canada into the U.S. are indeed USMCA are compliant, which means that this 35% tariff, although painful and costly, will not affect most trade going from Canada into the U.S. It represents a relatively small share of goods, and so in that sense, as you say, this may be as much a negotiation tactic or a kind of atmospheric policy as it is a fundamental one. And in that sense, it may be as a part of a negotiation on the part of the Trump administration to kind of, give Canada a sense of what's to come if we're not prepared to make some of the big compromises that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Are you interested in Canadian public policy? Are you motivated to grow our economy and raise Canadian living standards? I'm Sean Speer, co-founder and editor-at-large at The Hub, and I have a big opportunity for you. This year's Hunter Prize for Public Policy is giving away up to $50,000 in cash prizes for the best policy ideas to grow Canada's economy faster. If you've got a bold idea to encourage more investment, productivity, and job creation, we want to hear from you before the submission deadline on August 3rd. Visit thehub.ca/hunter-prize. You can win cash prizes and contribute to a better and stronger economy for Canada.
Just finally, Sean, it was a wild week for the president when it came to tariffs. There's, he's telegraphing, first there were the big copper tariffs, right? 50% on copper. There was a threat of 200% tariffs on pharmaceuticals, those seemingly coming in a year and a half. But again, is that being negotiated now? I mean, Canada's generic drug industry is a major player in keeping our healthcare costs low. Are we addressing those issues now? Or are we going to get hit with a 200% tariff on, on patents? Or I don't know how it would play out. I'm not an expert in the field, but it sounds bad. And then finally, there was the bizarre scenario where the president slapped a massive tariff on Brazil because of the government of the current government, the government of Lulu, and its court, separate from the government, leading a kind of Jan 6 style prosecution against Bolsonaro, the former president. So this is not an issue of trade imbalances or too much Brazilian beef making its way into U.S. supermarkets. This is using a tariff to try to come to the aid of a perceived political ally in Bolsonaro by Trump. And I mean, Brazil's not a small economy. This is I think tens of billions of dollars of goods with the U.S. And ironically, the United States has a surplus with Brazil on a trade balance. So I don't know, Sean. It suggests to me a president that may be increasingly erratic, and then maybe worryingly just seems utterly emboldened, utterly unconstrained, seemingly by his staff, by Congress, by threats of the court. I don't know. That to me just bodes ill for whatever discussions are happening with Canada right now. This is like the wrong moment to be having these high stakes negotiations happening with the White House.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Roger. Various points you can trick yourself into thinking that this is a normal president and a normal administration. I think, for instance, of the strike against Israel, against Iran in partnership with Israel. This was executed in a way that was sophisticated and well handled, and it almost caused one to forget that we have Donald Trump in the White House with all of his idiosyncrasies and insecurities and all the rest. And in the past few days, I think we've been reminded of just what a abnormal president he is and how he wields power abnormally. And the idea that after having, I would argue a couple of weeks of what seemed like stability and success coming out of the administration, he can't help himself. He's back at these types of unconventional, using that in the broadest sense, use of American power, blowing up negotiations with Canada, as you say, weighing into Brazilian politics through the use of tariffs, and on and on and on it goes. There's a lot of our listeners, viewers, who I suspect like aspects of the Trump administration's policy agenda. There are aspects that I like, but it's hard to separate those, Rudyard, from someone who just seems fundamentally unqualified, both substantively and temperamentally, to be the leader of the free world.
Yeah, I urge listeners and viewers to go back and tune into your most recent conversation with David Frum on the Hub's podcast and YouTube channel, where I think David shares some very wise advice. I mean, Canadian decision makers need to be careful here. We all want to assume that there's some kind of rational agent actor in the White House, either the president or his staff around him, members of cabinet, and I don't know. This week, you again kind of wonder if David's thesis isn't right, that it's not rational, and that this president values different things. He values toughness at times, resistance, people fighting back, pushing back to assert their interests. And look, that's high risk for Canada, undoubtedly, because of the asymmetry of the relationship economically. But you have to wonder if maybe in Ottawa they haven't made a tactical mistake, one that there could be some kind of rational conversation that could genuinely resolve these disputes. And second, that some toughness might be needed at some point. Maybe what Lulu in Brazil is doing is right, which is saying, forget it. We are not letting Bolsonaro off this court case. It is going forward. We are a sovereign nation, is what the president of Brazil has reiterated, and he's going to seemingly tough out these. I think they're 50% tariffs on Brazilian imports into the United States. And I'm just wondering, I don't know. I think there's going to come a time for Canada where we need to cut our fish bait. And look, it's high risk, it's high stakes, but if we just keep rolling over like we did on the DST, if we, as Mark Carney did in his tweet in response to Trump's letter, said, yes, indeed, sir, we will postpone the deadline until August 1st. I don't know. What if we submitted our proposals as planned on July 21st, as was originally agreed? Look, I'm not doing these negotiations. That's probably for the good, Sean, but I just wonder here if we're not kind of caught up in thinking that what's happening or what has happened in the White House with this president is truly exceptional, and Humpty Dumpty is not going to be put back together again.
Yeah, Mark Carney risks making a mistake that a lot of people have made over the past decade or longer, since Donald Trump entered politics, and that is that a lot of men in particular have had the sense that they can kind of manage him. I think of people like John Kelly and General Mattis and Reince Priebus and on and on. Elon Musk most recently. They think that there's something about, yes, of course, he's unpredictable and chaotic, but they can singularly kind of figure out how to control his urges and get something out of the relationship that is to their advantage. And everyone who's started with that assumption has come out, I would argue, worse for it. And Mark Carney, from the early days, you get the sense that he thought there was a combination of carrots and sticks, mostly carrots, as you say, and that through his intelligence and charm and all the rest, he could manage this person that seemingly no one else has been able to manage. And on DST in this letter today, you just get the sense that if that's your operating assumption for these negotiations, you're probably starting in the wrong place.
Yeah. Well, Sean, let's say goodbye to our complimentary audience watching and listening to today's Friday Roundtable on YouTube and on our podcast feed. If you want to catch the back half of the show where we're going to talk taxes. Yep, it's the dreaded T word. Your taxes may be going up as early as the federal budget this autumn in Canada. We're going to break down why and a kind of concerning fiscal situation that's brewing in our nation's capital. All of that exclusively for our Hub Heroes and Hub Fellows. You can become a Hub Hero for only $1 a week. It's the best deal in town, and you get a link immediately to listen to the back half of the roundtable on your favorite audio app. So do that now. We appreciate your patronage. I'll say goodbye to our free listeners and viewers and join our Hub Fellows in just a moment.